Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about VCT Masters Madrid and talking about who will win. Masters Madrid is set. We now know all of the 8 teams that will be participating, 2 from each of the 4 regions, and we're going to be going through each team participating in this event and seeing if we can make an argument for them being able to win it. And before we start that, I just want to say that this tournament might be the most wide open tournament we've ever seen in VCT, just in the entire existence of it. Aside from maybe Reykjavik 2021, where that was the first international tournament, so we didn't really fully know how each team was going to do, but now that we're, about 3 years past that, we do have a better idea of what teams are good and what teams are not, but even then, we've seen a lot of teams that maybe should have qualified, not qualify. We have a lot of new contenders, we have some old faces popping up, and it's going to be an extremely interesting tournament. This is a very hard tournament to predict. So we're going to be starting with talking about the Americas, and of course, the returning legends, Sentinels. For each of these teams, I put 3 things. First, the MVP, or at least the player that I believe is their MVP, their best map, and then the last international tournament that they qualified for. I didn't count lock-in in that because every team got to qualify for that, so it doesn't really say much about how good these teams have been in the past. So I think it's more relevant to show the one that they last qualified for. And of course, for Sentinels, it's been a long time coming. So for their MVP, I put Gen.G. Now, most of you are probably going to be saying, well, what about Zekken? What about Tens? I think that this team is doing as well as they're doing because of Gen.G. Zekken is a fantastic player, and he might end up by the end of the year being known as the best player in the world. He is capable of that. Ten seems like he's returning to his 2021 form, and all parts of this team, all players on this team are just firing on all cylinders. And I think that is because of Gen.G. I think him and his IGLing, I think he's proven himself as one of the top IGLs in the world already. We'll see how he does at the international level, but I think this team is doing as good, and these players are looking as good as they are because of Gen.G. Remember, this team did not look good without a star IGL. Now they have one, and the other players are better because of it. I absolutely give Gen.G. and Kaplan a huge amount of credit for the tournament that this team has had. Looking at their best map, you could put Sunset, but I decided to put Split because they are insanely dominant on that map. And for the maps, I just put the maps that are at kickoff, so just their stats at kickoff, not any previous tournaments because it's not relevant to right now. So at kickoff on Split, Sentinels went 5-2, attack was 46%, and defense was 74%. Attack side wasn't very good for them, but their defense, an absolutely dominant 74%. They were just insane on their defense side. Just no one could get past them by the end of kickoff. They did lose 2 times, but one of those times was against G2 when the maps didn't matter, so they weren't trying, and they obviously weren't going to show any strats on a map that didn't matter. And then the first time was against Loud at the very beginning of the kickoff tournament, so, they did kind of get stumped by Loud there, but they did end up beating Loud on that map during the grand final. Their last international tournament that they qualified for was Champions 2021. As I said, it's been a long time coming. This team at the start of Valorant was one of the best teams, the best team in the world at Masters Reykjavik 2021, and then quickly they started to fall off. Now, not only do they look like they are as good as they were back then, but potentially even better. At Champs 2021, they did place 9th to 12th, so that was kind of the start of their disappointment. They did also lose at Masters Berlin that year, but they had a better placement than 9th to 12th. So 9th to 12th was definitely not what their fans were expecting. And then that was the start of the downfall. But now they're back on the up, and we'll see how they do on the international stage once again. Moving on to the second place America's team, we're talking about Loud. For the MVP, I chose Sadek, another IGL, and I think it's for a simple reason. Sadek proves that he might be the best IGL in the entire world by being able to just bleed blood from a stone with this team. They lose Aspas in the offseason, their best player. They don't look like they've skipped a beat. Yeah, they lost the grand final against Sentinels, but they almost reverse swept Sentinels as well. Like, they almost came back in that match. And I think that's entirely because Sadek knows how to call this team, and he just doesn't fold under pressure at all. This man can have his team down 12-0, and I still wouldn't count them out. They're that good at comebacks, and that's entirely because I think Sadek is one of the best IGLs in the entire world, and he has a chance to prove that he is the best at this tournament. Talking about the best map at kickoff, I did put Ascent, so they did lose on Ascent, and that was against Evil Geniuses. They do have that wacky comp that they have, that for some reason includes Phoenix. They did stump Sentinels on that one as well. On their attack side, their 47% win rate, but defense was 62, so pretty solid numbers overall. Their last international tournament was, of course, Champions 2023, where they did place 3rd. Loud have qualified for every single international tournament since Reykjavik 2022. So when people were picking them to fall off because one player left in Aspas, I was like, that's not going to happen. I know it's Aspas and he was their best player, but I don't think this team has skipped a beat. And I think them being the underdogs now, I can't see them being anything less than just an extremely scary team to play. They're still insane. They're still great. They're still championship contenders. I don't think this team is going to look bad at this tournament. Yes, they lost to Sentinels in the grand finals. That is unfortunate for them. They lose out on those championship points, but they're still a very dominant team, and they're going to have a deep map pool, and they still have some players that are considered best in their roles, like Les, like Sadek. So I don't think that they're going to skip a beat here. So moving on to the Pacific teams, we are starting with Gen.G, who of course did win in the grand finals to be that upper seed. Not that that grand final meant anything for seedings, because it didn't, but it did matter for the championship points, so they get those over Paper X. For their MVP, I chose Texter, who just had an insane tournament. I think Global Esports has definitely annoyed themselves for not keeping Texter, but he does not look like the same player that he did last year. He is looking fantastic this tournament, one of the best teams in the Pacific region and one of the best players in the Pacific region. For the best map at kickoff, I went with Lotus. They had a 4-1 record on it. Attack was 62%, defense was 50%. So maybe you want that defense to be a little bit better, but still being 50% is solid, and attack being 62, that's good too. They have never qualified for an international tournament in their entire time as an organization within Valorant, even when that organization had a team in NA. So this is a big moment for this team, especially being the top representative out of Pacific. You know, they're probably hoping to not be like the Guard when back in 2022, when they were the top seed in Americas, or in North America. They went to that Reykjavik 2022, and then they lost every single map. So Gen.G, you know, and other teams that have never qualified before, they're definitely going to be hoping that that doesn't happen to them. That is definitely one thing I'm keeping in mind when I make my predictions, is how are the experienced teams going to be doing against the inexperienced teams? Experience is a very important thing, but if you're not keeping up with the meta the same way that these younger teams are doing and that these less experienced teams are doing, it's going to just come down to how well can you push through. Which brings me to Paper X, who aside from Loud are probably the most experienced team at this tournament. For the MVP, I chose something. You could say Forsaken, you could say Devi, but I went with something. He's still the very insane player that he was in 2023. Last year, something was basically the Demon 1 of the Pacific region. He came into the Paper X roster when that team was struggling and ended up being one of the main reasons why they turned it around and had some very good placements last year. Unfortunately, he could not attend Masters Tokyo, and the team did fall short at both that tournament and then at Champions. So hopefully something can help this team finally get that international win. For the best map at kickoff, they didn't play a lot of maps. They only played 3 matches total, but I went with Split. They were 2-0 on it. Attack was 63%, defense was 60%. For their last international tournament, it was of course Champions 2023, where they placed second, losing to Evil Geniuses in the grand final. I know people aren't as high on this team as they may have been in the past. People don't think they're going to be as good as they were in 2023. Plat Chat's pretty low on them, I believe, on their power ranking for all of these teams. Just the teams going to Madrid, they had them, I believe, at 7th. I personally disagree with that. I think this team is still a tournament contender. I know they don't have Jane anymore. That is a big loss. Monyet, he's not the same player that Jane is. He gives the teams more options with what character he can play, but even if he's more of a flexible player than Jane was, you still would probably rather have Jane be known as the best Raze in the world. So far, Monyet's time on Paper X has been a bit of a mixed bag, admittedly, but there is still time for him to get acclimated to the roster and to how they play. I don't think he's just been totally not fitting in at all. I think he's had his moments and he's had his downbeats, but I do think he can recover and show some stuff on his first international tournament. I know people are down on this team. I know they don't look like what they were in 2023 or 2022. I know they're missing Jane, but honestly, if you really look at it, if you look at the opponents at this tournament, this actually might be Paper X's best chance to win an international. As I said earlier, aside from Loud, they are the most experienced team at international tournaments in this entire tournament. They have made every international tournament since 2022, and they've almost won 2 of them. I don't think just because one player has left that they're totally out of that race. Maybe they're a bit one-dimensional, maybe the W gaming strat that they always have where they just go, 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 and it's just chaos, but if they get other teams to play that game, to play that chaos game with them, instead of, playing the other team's game, they can absolutely beat anybody. I still consider Paper X to be favorites. They don't have to deal with Fnatic. They have to get through, Loud or Sentinels or Karmine Corp, 3 teams that are very good, but I still consider them one of the best teams in the world, and I hope that they do very well here. I still believe that they're the favorites to finally bring Pacific an international championship, but we will see. They have let their fans down and me before. So moving on to the EMEA teams, these are 2 very interesting candidates. We have Karmine Corp and Team Heretics. So EMEA kickoff was just the tournament of underdogs. So many teams won that I did not expect them to. Even Koi won a match. And Karmine Corp last year were one of the worst teams in the entire world. They were garbage. They were straight trash. But now they have a completely new roster, and aside from Shin, of course, and they look so good right now. So I did my video about the EMEA kickoff a couple days ago, and some people were mad that I was kind of focusing on the fact that Fnatic and Na'Vi choked and not praising Karmine Corp. So here it is. Here's me praising Karmine Corp. They are very good. I do think Fnatic did choke in that game. I don't think they were as ready as they should have been, but I wasn't saying that to take away from how good Karmine Corp looked. They looked insane all tournament. They only lost to Team Heretics, and then they ended up beating them in the grand finals. They basically did the same thing that Sentinels did, where they lost early and then just ran through planes and just looked incredible while doing it. And Narrate, I believe, is their MVP. From being a player that was on one of the worst North American Challengers teams, or I think the worst North American Challengers team, and I believe it was Mad Lions or something, to now being potentially one of the best players in the entire world, that's an insane comeback for Narrate. He's looked insane. People have him very high ranked on top 10 players at Madrid, and I don't blame them. He's looked incredible. For the best map at kickoff, I chose Split. They had a 3-1 record on it. Attack was 52% and defense was 55%. I believe they beat Fnatic on Split in just an absolute masterclass on it. I know Fnatic made that game kind of close, but I think they won by 8 rounds, so it's not really that close. But either way, they look dominant on that map, and I'll be very interested to see if they get to play Sentinels. Not only that would be just an insanely clouted match, Karmine Corp having every person in France being a fan of them, and then Sentinels, of course, having the fan base that they do. That would be an insanely clout-based match. But it would also be very curious to see how each of these teams, being very good at that split map, I'd be very curious to see how that would go on that map. They've never made an international tournament, so yet again, another team that has not made an international tournament before. Both EMEA representatives have never made an international event. People are choosing Karmine Corp to be their favorites. I do question the experience on that team just because a lot of these players haven't made it to international tournaments yet, but at the same time, just the way that they look, how good they look. They have their coach, Ain, who I believe was the coach for Gambit, who has won an international tournament. While maybe their players don't have a lot of experience at an international stage, that coach does, and he is an insanely good coach, and I do expect this team to at least have a very deep run. Do I think they'll win? Honestly, I don't know. I think maybe they do well here and then, maybe bring it back at Shanghai. I don't know if I see them winning this one, but they very well could. Moving on to the other EMEA team, we have Team Heretics, who, man, I had them last on my EMEA power rankings. I looked like a fool because they looked absolutely insane. They beat Na'Vi. They beat some really good teams in the previous rounds. And one of the reasons why is because of Miniboo, who is the brother of Boo. So that nepotism buff working out really well right now. He had an insanely good tournament. He looked fantastic. And he was even playing like Neon and stuff. He's a bit flexible on that duelist role, and that's very good. For their best map at kickoff, Sunset, they went 2-0 on. Attack was 36%, defense was 74%. So that attack side being kind of bad, but that defense side makes up for it in spades. As I said before, they have not made an international tournament. They beat Na'Vi to get here, one of the more experienced teams at international tournaments. I think they're in a really good spot. They are a team with a lot of rookies on it. That's why I didn't really have them rated high on my power ranking, but they've proved me wrong, and they could definitely do it again. I don't know if I see their chances as that good. They have looked good throughout their kickoff tournament, but there is some very, very experienced teams. And while I do think some of the rookies are going to do very well here, I don't know if the players on Heretics are going to be the ones to do that, but we'll see. So moving on to China. So this is the first year of the VCT China League. And for the teams that qualified for this tournament, we have some usual suspects here in Edward Gaming and FPX. In Edward Gaming's case, they have been the best team in China for some time now. Last year, they were at every international tournament, making their way through the, not China League at that point, but all the tournaments that they had to qualify for the VCT events. And they've been extremely dominant throughout that time, and Kane is one of the main reasons why. This man tore it up at Tokyo last year, didn't really do as well at Champions, but he looked fantastic, and I think he looks like one of just the hungriest players in Valorant right now. He can hit some insane shots. He had some crazy stats at that Tokyo tournament, and I'm very excited to see what he does at Madrid. For the best maps at kickoff, just like Paper X, they didn't play a lot of maps because they were the top seed, but on Breeze, they went 2-0. Attack was 44%, but defense was 64%. For their last international tournament, they were at Champions 2023, where they placed 5th to 6th. So a bit of a disappointment for them there, but they have been able to upset some pretty good teams in the past. I believe last year at Tokyo they beat Loud, which was very surprising to me. I was not expecting that at all. So they have some really good players. China as a region hasn't been able to do a lot of damage at the international level. EDG have gone the closest, but EDG has looked very good in the past. Now they have a bit more experience, and they still looked like a top team in their region. So they absolutely could be a tournament contender. I don't know if I see them in like the top 5 or top 4 of this tournament, but I can see them doing some damage, and you don't have to deal with like a Fnatic or something. So in terms of who's the favorite for this tournament, it's pretty up in the air, so EDG could make their way into that conversation. I believe their first match is against Paper X, so that is kind of a toss-up, but I would expect Paper X to probably be the favorites for that. But EDG, I do think they can pull up some upsets here and probably do some damage and maybe prove that Boostia was wrong and that China can actually be a good region. Which brings us to the next team in FPX, who have made it to international tournaments in the past before. For the MVP, I went with Life, who had a good tournament at kickoff. For the best map at kickoff, Lotus, they went 2-0. Attack was a very good 72%, and defense was a respectable 57%. Their last international tournament was Champions 2023, same as EDG, but they did not do as well. They placed 13th to 16th, and they maybe could have beat EDG in that grand final at kickoff, but they made some pretty drastic mistakes that lost them some rounds, that lost them some games. So, maybe they could be as good or better than EDG, but I do think at an international stage, EDG is probably above them. So those are all the teams. Those are my thoughts on how I think each team can do. I know I'm going to be wrong about most of them, but now I'm going to choose the teams that I think are the favorites to win this tournament. In no particular order, I'm going to go with Sentinels, Loud, Karmine Corp, and Paper X. So half the tournament, so I think 4 teams are the favorites, and then the rest probably not going to win too much. I know, Gen.G beat Paper X, so if people get mad at me having Paper X above Gen.G in that, Paper X are bad at grand finals. I don't know what it is, but every grand finals they just lose. And, they had a lot of wacky comps throughout the entire kickoff tournament, and unfortunately Gen.G did get the better of them, and Gen.G do look like the better team right now, but I don't think beating a team once necessarily means that you're better than that team. It just means that you beat them in that moment. I think Paper X, when they get to that international stage, they just put on another gear. So those are my thoughts on VCT Masters Madrid. I will be doing my pick'ems and my power rankings for this tournament as well, so look out for those. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who do you believe are the favorites for this tournament? Thank you very much for watching. Please click like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.